Hiếu is 25 years old. He has a tall, slender build, tanned skin, and eyes that always seem to carry a trace of sorrow. He lives alone in a small house at the edge of the forest. In a rural part of central Vietnam, a place where the days scorch like fire and the nights are filled with the sounds of insects and a creeping chill that slips through the bamboo walls. Hiếu lost his parents when he was a child. His grandmother raised him with modest love until she passed away when he was 18. Since then, he has grown used to living alone, earning a living by herding ducks for hire, and sometimes taking on construction or hauling jobs when called. Gentle, quiet, and withdrawn, the people in the lower hamlet call him Hiếu from the forest's edge. That night, there was no moon. The wind whispered through the banana trees behind the house, sounding like someone moaning. Hiếu was lying on his bamboo bed by the window, holding an old book, when 3 distinct knocks suddenly echoed at the door. He tilted his head, eyes fixed toward the door. The oil lamp flickered, casting his long shadow across the mottled cement floor. Slowly, he pushed himself up, his voice hoarse as he asked, "Who's there?" There was no reply. The wind kept sighing through the gaps in the walls, producing a sound eerily like a human breath. Hiếu stepped forward, gently lifting the thin fabric curtain hanging at the door. He didn't open it right away but bent down to peer through a crack in the rotting wood. The yard was empty. Only the shadow of trees stretched across the sandy ground, and the faint rustling of crickets by the ditch. He frowned, muttering to himself, probably the village kids messing around. But he knew no child in this poor hamlet would dare come near the forest edge houses after 9 at night. They still whispered about a man who had hanged himself here in '89. And no one had dared to come after dark since. And yet, someone had knocked? Hiếu turned off the lamp and lay back down. But the knocking came again, this time 4 sharp raps, urgent and right against the wall. He sprang up instinctively. His steps halted midway across the room, heart pounding. "Who's there?" His voice was firmer this time. The question fell into dead silence. Then, a tiny voice, like a child's whisper, came from behind the wall. "Open the door for me. I'm so cold." Hiếu swallowed hard. His body froze for several seconds. Before he could react, the sound of footsteps suddenly dashed past the window, making the curtain flap wildly as if someone had just brushed by. A strange chill swept in, snuffing out the oil lamp. He lunged for the door, flung it open, and scanned the yard. Nothing, only a small, muddy footprint stamped on the cement step. Hiếu stood still, heart pounding in his chest. He told himself, "That can't be a person, no way." He stepped back inside, fumbling for the last incense stick on the altar and lighting it. The scent of burning incense softened the tension strung tight in the cramped house. His hands trembled, but his eyes searched every corner, looking for any reason to believe he wasn't being haunted. That night, Hiếu didn't sleep. He sat with his back against the wall, the incense glowing red in his hand. Around 3 in the morning, the first rooster crowed. Hiếu had just begun to drift off when a child's giggle floated up right outside the window. He jolted upright, rushing over. He saw no one, but this time, beside the muddy footprint, there was a scrap of red cloth, small like a handkerchief, frayed and torn at the edges. He picked it up and sniffed. The pungent metallic smell, like blood. The next morning, heavy rain poured since dawn. Hiếu skipped duck herding, huddled inside, clutching the red cloth tightly. By noon, Vinh, his friend from a construction job in the next commune, rode his bicycle through the rain to find him. As soon as he propped his bike against the porch, he called out, "Have you heard what happened at old Mrs. Sao Men's house this morning?" Hiếu looked up, rain dripping from the leaky roof onto his forehead. "Which Mrs. Sao?" Vinh wiped the water from his face, lowering his voice. "The old lady from the lower hamlet. This morning her daughter came by, knocked and called, but no answer. She went inside and found her dead stiff by the altar. Her face was pale as if she'd been strangled, but there wasn't a rope anywhere." Hiếu frowned. "Did they call the police?" Vinh nodded. "They did, but it's strange, man. By her feet, there was a tiny muddy footprint. And also," Vinh tipped his hat back, whispering, She was clutching a piece of red cloth in her hand, like someone stuffed it there. Hugh's grip tightened on the cloth in his pocket. His throat felt dry, his heart pounding harder. Did the cloth have frayed edges? Vinh blinked in surprise. Yeah, how'd you know? It did. The women in the hamlet were gossiping, saying it looked like a child's handkerchief. Old-style fabric, like the kind used for offerings. Hugh drew in a breath, his voice low. Last night someone knocked on my door and left this. He pulled the cloth from his pocket and set it on the table. Vin's face went pale, stepping back half a pace. My God, it's identical. Did you see its face? Hugh shook his head. No, just a voice like a child's. And laughter. Near dawn, Vinh bit his lip, whispering, I heard the old women say, long ago a child drowned in the ditch behind the fields. No one buried it. The body floated for days. They say the spirit follows the first person who passes by. Your place is very close to that ditch. Hugh stayed silent. The wind whipped hard against the porch. The two of them stared at each other, heavy with unspoken thoughts. After a moment, Hugh stood, determination in his eyes. I have to go there. I can't just sit here. Vinh startled. It's pouring out there. Are you crazy? Hugh slipped on a thin raincoat, eyes still fixed on the cloth. If I don't go, I'm afraid it'll come back tonight. And it won't just knock. The ditch behind the fields lay at the bottom of a gentle slope. The rain had turned the red earth into slippery mud, making every step slide. Hugh followed the narrow trail, flanked by bamboo groves and wild myrtle bushes. When he was a child, this was where kids played hide and seek. But since the drowning, no one had dared come back. At the ditch's edge, the water swirled muddy and fast. Thick grass covered most of the bank. Hugh knelt, pushing the grass aside near the water's edge. At that moment, a pale hand shot up from beneath the water. Gripping his wrist, Hugh screamed, yanking himself backward. The hand dissolved like it had never existed. Only a black ring of mud remained imprinted on his skin. Ice cold. The rain kept falling. The wind whispered through the bamboo like a voice murmuring in his ear. Hugh stood still on the bank, his eyes lost in the sight of the current carrying away the traces of mud from his arm. In his heart, he knew he had stepped onto a path where the way back was no longer clear. The rain kept falling without pause, each heavy drop stinging Hugh's face like tiny whips. His thin raincoat clung to his body, the cold seeping deep into his skin. He stood there on the bank of the ditch, eyes fixed on the swirling water as if it wanted to drag everything down into its depths. A chill drifted up from the water's edge, slipping under his collar and making him shiver. He lifted his hand, staring at the black ring of mud that was slowly smudging in the rain. It didn't wash away completely but clung in faint streaks, like the imprint of fingers pressed deep into his skin. Footsteps splashed through the water behind him. Hugh turned to see Vinh, wearing a palm leaf rain hat and clutching a bamboo stick, panting for breath. I told you not to come here. You're insane. Weather like this is dangerous. Hugh lowered his voice, raspy from the cold. Why did you follow me? Vinh stepped closer, glancing around as if afraid someone might see them. I was worried you'd run into trouble alone. Besides, I wanted to see for myself. They say the little girl who died here years ago had a red cloth tied around her head before they dropped her into the ditch. Hugh frowned, speaking slowly. Why would they do that? Vinh hesitated for a moment before answering in a hushed tone. The old women say it was a charm to keep the body in place. They did it so her spirit wouldn't come back to haunt the village. But I guess it didn't work. The two fell silent. The only sounds were the relentless rain and the water knocking against the rotting bamboo stakes at the ditch's edge. Hugh took a deep breath, knelt down, and used a bamboo branch to prod at the spot where he'd seen the hand emerge earlier. The water kept spinning in circles, but underneath, it was pitch black, swallowing the light. Vinh swallowed hard, his voice trembling. Do you see anything? Hugh shook his head, but just as he was about to stand, a tiny cry rose from the depths, a faint, pitiful sound, like a kitten mewling. Both men locked eyes instantly, wide with shock. Vinh stumbled back, his voice breaking. I heard it. Hugh's voice was firm. "That's not a cat." It sounded like a child. They stood frozen until a sodden scrap of red cloth floated toward the bank. Hugh quickly hooked it out. It was identical to the one he'd found the night before, except this one's edges were intact. Not torn. Vin recoiled, speaking urgently. "Throw it back. That thing, it's soaked in bad energy." Hugh didn't answer. He held the cloth tightly, his gaze following the current. In his mind, the child's whisper from last night echoed. "Open the door for me. I'm so cold." A strong gust swept across the ditch, sending ripples fanning outward. Then, a pale face with wide, lifeless eyes slowly rose from the water just a few yards away. Vin cried out in terror. "Run, Hugh!" But Hugh stood rooted to the spot, his legs anchored to the ground. He could see clearly now, a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old, her hair soaked and plastered to her face, lips bluish purple. Her unblinking eyes seemed to bore straight into him. Then suddenly, her small body sank beneath the surface as swiftly as it had appeared. The water returned to stillness, leaving only the pounding rain. Vin yanked hard on Hugh's sleeve, dragging him away. "Do you have a death wish?" Hugh pulled free but eventually followed Vin back along the narrow path. Even as he walked, he kept glancing over his shoulder, the sensation of something trailing just behind him refusing to fade. By the time they reached home, both were soaked through. Vin was shivering as he said, "I swear, I'm never going back there again." Hugh placed the new piece of cloth next to the old one on the table. His voice dropped. "It didn't want you to see. It's looking for me." Vin's eyes widened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Hugh looked toward the doorway, where the light was already dimming. "Last night, it came to my door. Tonight, I think it'll be back." Vin's face paled. He edged toward the door. "Then I'm leaving. Don't be stupid enough to open it." Hugh didn't stop him. He let Vin go, then shut the door. The only sounds left were the soft patter of rain and the damp chill hanging in the air. He sat down and lit the oil lamp. His shadow leaned long across the wall. The 2 red cloths lay neatly on the table, still cold and wet. Night fell. The rain eased to a sparse drizzle. Hugh leaned back against the wall, eyes half closed, when there came a faint scratching at the door, as if something were lightly clawing the wood. His eyes flew open. The sound paused for a beat. Then came 3 soft knocks, exactly like the night before. Hugh swallowed, rising to his feet, his hand gripping the oil lamp tightly. The child's voice came again, this time clearer. "I'm so cold, open the door for me." The child's voice came through the damp wooden door, so close that Hugh felt he could reach out and touch it. In the wavering light of the oil lamp, his shadow stretched long across the earthen floor, trembling as if unwilling to take another step forward. Hugh glanced at the table, where the 2 red cloths lay stacked atop each other. The dim yellow light made the red look even darker, like dried blood. He took a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Who are you?" Outside, silence. The rain had stopped entirely. Only the sound of water dripping from the thatched roof into the clay jar by the porch remained. Then the voice spoke again, this time choked, as if on the verge of tears. "I'm cold, let me in." Hugh stepped closer to the door, pressing his ear to the wooden panel. He asked slowly, each word deliberate, as if testing the air. "What do you want here?" A long pause. Then the thin, fragile voice answered in a near whisper. "Give it back?" The hairs on Hugh's neck stood on end. His eyes flicked to the 2 red cloths on the table. He knew exactly what it meant. "You mean these pieces of cloth?" His fist clenched, his voice dropping low. The air seemed to thicken. Outside, tiny bare footsteps began pacing around the porch, slow and even, as if someone was walking barefoot on the damp ground. Suddenly, there was a click. The side window creaked open. A gust of cold wind blew in, making the oil lamp flicker wildly. Hugh spun around, heart pounding. On the window sill, a pale hand rested, its thin, bony fingers like twigs, nails long and gray. He stepped back, grabbing the bamboo stick leaning in the corner. Forcing his voice to cut through the fear, he demanded, "Who are you?" There was no reply. The hand slowly withdrew. vanishing beyond the window frame. Another blast of wind rushed in, carrying a rank, swampy odor. Hiếu lunged forward, slamming the window shut and bolting it. When he turned, he froze. A small figure stood at the front doorway. The oil lamp's glow didn't reach that far, but he could see it clearly, a little girl. Her long hair soaked, wearing a once white dress now stained yellow-brown. A red scarf tied around her head. Her face was deathly pale, and her eyes were bottomless black, no whites, only darkness like a pit. She stood still, water dripping from her onto the step, mixing with the old mud stain from the night before. Hiếu stepped back half a pace, tightening his grip on the stick. His voice rasped, "What do you want?" The girl tilted her head at an odd angle, hair falling over half her face. Her voice was thin, stretched out. "Give it back?" Then her figure dissolved like smoke, leaving the doorway empty. Only the wind seeping through the walls remained, carrying a stench even stronger than before. Hiếu dropped into a chair, cold sweat running down his spine despite the chill in the air. He looked at the two cloths on the table. They were now soaked with water, though he was certain no one had touched them. The next morning, the sky was heavy with gray clouds. Hiếu put the two cloths into a plastic bag, intending to return them to the ditch. As he reached the lane, he ran into Mrs. Tu, the oldest resident in the lower hamlet, carrying vegetables to the market. She caught sight of the bag in his hand. Her eyes lit up, then instantly drained of color. Setting her pole on the ground, she asked urgently, "What's that, Hiếu?" Hiếu hesitated, then replied, Red cloth. Someone left it at my door the past 2 nights." Mrs. Tu narrowed her eyes, staring at him for a long moment before pulling him closer to whisper, "Throw it away. That thing's tied to a vengeful spirit. Years ago, they wrapped a red scarf around the head of a drowned girl in the ditch, to keep her soul from returning. But," her voice dropped even lower, "they did the ritual wrong, so she became spiteful. Whoever keeps her red scarf, she'll follow to the end." Hiếu froze, his heartbeat thudding. He asked quickly, "Then what should I do?" Mrs. Tu glanced around as if afraid someone might overhear. "Only one way, return it to where she died. But you must go alone. At night, when there's no moon. If not, she'll sense your fear and cling even harder." Hiếu said nothing. In his mind, the image of the dark ditch, the faint crying, and the icy hand gripping his own returned in vivid detail. By late afternoon, black clouds shrouded the sky. The small village lit oil lamps early. Knowing rain was coming, Hiếu sat inside, clutching the plastic bag, staring at the dark patch beyond the bamboo grove. He knew tonight there would be no moon, and if he followed Mrs. Tu's instructions, he'd have to go back to the ditch. Outside, the wind began to whistle through the gaps in the wall, carrying the damp, heavy scent. In it, he thought he heard a faint, childlike giggle. The wind grew stronger, lashing the thatched roof, making the dry leaves rustle like whispers. In the sickly yellow lamplight, Hiếu sat motionless at the table, hands gripping the bag with the 2 red cloths. He was already wearing his thin raincoat, plastic sandals placed neatly under his feet. Outside, insects chirped endlessly, mixed with the occasional lonely bark of a dog from the far end of the hamlet. No moon, no stars. The sky was a solid black cloth covering the whole village. Hiếu exhaled and told himself, "If I don't return it, it won't let me go." He stood, snuffed out the oil lamp, slung the plastic bag across his chest, and stepped into the yard. The bamboo at the end of the lane swayed in the wind. As if waiting, the path to the ditch was pitch black, the wet red earth sticking to his sandals. Every step made a wet, squelching sound. The smell of fresh mud and weeds mixed with a faint metallic stench that made him shiver. When he reached the bank, the wind suddenly died. The stillness was so complete that Hiếu could hear his own heartbeat in his chest. He knelt, opened the bag, and took out the 2 red cloths. They were still cold and wet, clinging together. He looked at the murky water flowing slowly below, then sighed, "I'm giving this back to you, don't come for me again." He let go. The cloth slipped from his fingers, floating briefly before sinking. At that moment, A soft giggle rose from the middle of the ditch, a child's laughter. Light as air yet chilling to the bone. Hiếu straightened instantly, eyes wide on the water. Ripples spread from a single point in the current. Then a white shape surfaced. It was the little girl. The red scarf still tied around her head. Her eyes deep and black. She didn't come closer, only drifted, staring directly at him. That gaze made it hard for him to breathe. Her voice floated over, thin and icy. Given, back, stay? Hiếu stepped back, but his foot slipped in the mud. When he looked up, the girl was gone. The ditch lay flat and still, as if nothing had been there. The wind returned, rushing through the bamboo, carrying what sounded like the rapid patter of footsteps along the ditch's edge. Hiếu whipped around, no one. He bolted for home, heart hammering. When he reached his yard, he stopped, gasping for breath. The house was still dark. Just as he was about to step inside, a rattling sound came from the door. Hiő's hand trembled as he touched the latch. He cracked it open, just enough to see the porch. A fresh red cloth lay right on the doorstep. Water dripped from it onto the ground, forming a long, wet trail leading out toward the lane. Hiếu froze, eyes widening. He had just returned it to the ditch. A child's voice, right by his ear, whispered, "Stay with me?" He stumbled back, slamming into the table, knocking over the oil lamp. The flame went out with a hiss. In the suffocating darkness, the giggling returned, not just one voice now, but many. They circled the house, near and far, overlapping like a game of chase in the night. Hiếu stood frozen, gripping the edge of the table. Outside, the red cloth still dripped, its water pooling on the ground. Hiếu stood motionless in the darkness, his back pressed against the table. Every muscle pulled taut like a rope stretched to its limit. The sound of children's laughter drifted around the yard, sometimes far off by the bamboo grove, sometimes right outside the door. Each time it came close, the nape of his neck turned icy cold, as if a freezing breath were blowing directly onto his skin. A sharp click came from the corner of the house. Hiếu turned his head to see the window latch trembling slightly, as though something had touched it. Holding his breath, he took slow, deliberate steps toward it. Without warning, a tiny, pale hand slipped through the gap, its fingers long and pointed, hooking onto the latch and yanking hard. The window flew open. Hiếu staggered back, his hand groping for the bamboo stick. Outside the window, a little girl's face pressed against the bars, eyes pitch black, lips tinged purple, hair dripping wet as if she had just risen from underwater. She stared at him without blinking, then let out a soft giggle, the sound slipping through the opening like a gust of cold air. Hiếu forced his voice steady. "What do you want from me?" The girl tilted her head and spoke slowly. "Stay." As the last syllable left her lips, her face faded away like smoke, leaving the empty frame. A gust of wind rushed in, carrying the heavy stench of something rotten. Hiếu spun toward the front door. He wanted to rush into the yard, to escape the feeling of being surrounded. But when he pulled the door open, he froze. On the step lay the red cloth, now spread wide, as if an invisible hand were holding it in place. Laughter rose again, this time from all four directions. Hiếu realized there wasn't just one figure, but several small shapes moving out there. In the dim light of the moonless night, he caught fleeting glimpses of short figures darting past, long hair, white dresses, each with a red scarf wrapped around the head. His heart pounded violently. He slammed the door shut, threw the latch, and backed into the corner of the room. The laughter went on until nearly midnight, then stopped. Outside was so still he could hear the sound of leaves falling. Hiếu strained to listen, nothing. He decided to light the oil lamp, but as he reached for the match, his fingers touched something ice cold. Startled, he looked. On the table lay the red cloth, soaking wet, water spreading across the wood. For a moment, his heart seemed to stop. He shot to his feet, shoving the chair away from the table. A tiny voice spoke right behind him. "You've given it back, but..." Hiếu spun around, but the house was empty. Only the bamboo chair in the corner swayed gently, as if someone had just stood up and left. The next morning, Hiếu went to see Mrs. Tu. After hearing everything, her expression turned grave. It's chosen you. Returning it isn't enough. Hieu's voice was rough with urgency. Then what do I do? She paused, thinking, before speaking softly. To break the tie, you have to find the exact place where she died, where her body got caught. That ditch is deep, with many branches. Only someone who's seen it could tell you. Hieu frowned. Who's seen it? Her gaze was heavy as she answered. There's one man, but he doesn't like to talk about it. If you can get him to tell you, you might have a chance. That afternoon, Hieu went to the small hut on the edge of the village, where Old Bay, the solitary fisherman, lived. When Hieu called out, the old man poked his head out, his cloudy eyes squinting. You're the one from the forest's edge, aren't you? Hieu nodded and told him everything. Bay stayed silent for a long time, then let out a slow sigh. Back then, I saw it myself. The girl's body had snagged on a branch in the ditch behind the old bamboo grove. She had a red scarf tied around her head, and in her arms, she was clutching a torn doll. Hieu stood frozen. The old man stared off into nothing, his voice lowering. On nights when the rain's heavy, I can still hear her calling. After a pause, he went on. If you want to end this, tonight, at this exact time, go to that place. But remember, no matter what you hear, don't look back. Hieu's fists tightened. He knew that tonight, he would have to step into the deepest part of this story. Dusk fell quickly. It was barely past 6. Yet the sky was already a heavy shade of gray. Thick clouds sagging low as if warning of night rain. Hieu stood on his porch, eyes fixed on the bamboo grove behind the village. In his head, Mr. Bay's warning from earlier echoed, don't look back, no matter what you hear. His grip tightened on the oil lamp in his hand, his palms slick with sweat. At his feet, the dirt path leading to the forest's edge was pitted with ox cart tracks, flanked on both sides by young rice fields. The scent of fresh grain mingled with the earthy tang of wet mud. When he reached the bamboo grove, the sound of the wind above was unlike in daylight. The bamboo creaked and groaned, and the chorus of insects seemed to shrink away, as if something had just entered. Hieu took a deep breath and turned onto the narrow footpath, the overgrown grass brushing against his legs. After a short walk, he heard someone calling softly. And Hieu. The voice was clear, childlike, drifting from somewhere behind him. Hieu froze, a chill racing up his spine. But remembering the warning, he pressed his lips together and did not turn around. The voice came again, closer this time, right by his ear. Don't leave me. Hieu quickened his pace, heart pounding. The path grew narrower, trees closing in on both sides, the oil lamp casting only a small halo in the suffocating darkness. At the final bend, the sound of trickling water reached his ears. A branch of the ditch came into view, its water black and still, glinting faintly with the lamplight. Across the way, the roots of an old tree twisted down into the current, beneath which the water swirled into a slow whirlpool. Kneeling, Hieu held the lamp low, searching for a sign. Within seconds, he spotted something drifting in the flow, a torn doll. Its matted curls stuck together, one glass eye missing. Around its neck was a strip of red cloth, streaked with mud. A sudden cold gust swept over him, making the lamp flame shudder. Laughter erupted behind him, this time, clearly from several voices at once. Hieu tensed, forcing himself not to turn. He leaned forward, intending to hook the doll in with a stick, but the moment his hand brushed the water, an icy grip clamped tight around his wrist. Through the rippling surface, the little girl's face appeared, her deep black eyes locked on his. She did not smile, her lips pressed tight as she began to pull him down. Hieu cried out, wrenching his arm free and tumbling backward onto the grass. The oil lamp fell, but miraculously stayed lit. The laughter stopped, the water stilled, as though nothing had happened. The doll remained at the center of the whirlpool, the lamplight gleaming eerily in its glass eye. Shaking, Hieu got to his feet, breathing hard. From his pocket, he pulled the red cloth he had wrapped earlier, ready to toss it into the ditch. But then, a small, icy hand rested on his shoulder from behind. A whisper brushed his ear. "Stay with me?" Clenching his jaw, he hurled the cloth into the whirlpool. Immediately, The water surged as if something heavy had dropped in. The wind roared, bamboo leaves whipping violently overhead. Hiếu squeezed his eyes shut and ran full speed down the trail. The sound of tiny, quick footsteps pattering right behind him all the way until he burst out of the grove. When he reached home, he locked the door and leaned against the wall, sweat soaking through his shirt. He thought he was safe until he noticed, in the corner of the room, the torn doll lying there, drenched, still wrapped in the red cloth. Hiếu stumbled back, his heart thundering. Outside in the yard, the sound of children's laughter rose again, clearer than it had ever been. Rain had been falling since nightfall, heavy and relentless, drumming against the tiled roof in a constant roar. Inside the small house, Hiếu sat at the table, the oil lamp casting a pale glow over his ashen face. In the corner, the soaked doll still lay there, its body tightly bound with the strip of red cloth like a binding cord. He had tried throwing it into the yard when he first came home. But less than a minute after turning his back, it was back in the exact same spot. Now Hiếu understood, whether he wanted it or not, it would remain here. A knock came suddenly. 3 slow taps, not loud, but steady. Hiếu rose, walking slowly toward the door, gripping the oil lamp firmly in his hand. His voice was low but edged as he called out, "Who's there?" No reply. Only the sound of rain. Hiếu pressed his ear to the door, and a child's voice seeped through, damp as though soaked in rain. "Open the door." He jerked back, startled. It was the same voice he had heard in the bamboo grove yesterday. The doll still lay in the corner, its glass eyes fixed toward the door. An idea flashed in his mind. Hiếu stepped over, picked up the doll, lifted it to his face, and murmured, "What do you want?" The wind outside howled. The door shuddered in its frame. The oil lamp flickered, casting shifting shadows of him and the doll on the wall. In that moment, he saw the glass eyes blink, like something was looking out from inside. The child's voice came again, this time right next to his ear. "Come with me?" The door swung open, though the latch was still in place. Hiếu instinctively stepped back, but the rush of cold air from outside made him pause. Through the curtain of white rain, a small figure stood faintly visible at the gate, a little girl in a white dress. Her hair plastered wet against her face, her deep black eyes unblinking. Hiếu tightened his grip on the doll, stepping out onto the porch. The rain stung his face like ice. He spoke, forcing his voice steady. "Who are you?" The girl tilted her head, speaking evenly, as if reciting from memory. "I'm lost. Take me home?" She turned without another word, walking straight toward the path leading to the bamboo grove. She did not look back, did not stop. The doll in Hiő's hand suddenly grew heavy, as though it carried the weight of a full body. In his mind, Mr. Bay's warning rang out, "Don't look back, no matter what you hear." But this time, the choice was his. If he followed, he might find the answer. If he stayed, this thing would never let him go. Hiếu pulled on his raincoat, grabbed the oil lamp, shoved the doll into the cloth bag at his side, and stepped down into the yard. Rain pelted down in sheets, mud rising to his ankles. Following the girl's shadow, he realized the familiar path from daytime now seemed twice as long. The trees on either side thicker, pressing in, the sound of rain on the leaves mingled with the patter of small footsteps just ahead. Near the bamboo grove, the girl suddenly stopped. She turned and smiled. For an instant, her face warped, her mouth tearing wide, her eyes opening unnaturally large. The doll in his bag began to tremble violently. Hiếu felt tiny fingers creeping out of the bag, crawling along his ribs. He yanked hard and flung the doll to the ground. But the moment it hit the mud, it vanished. The girl spoke, her voice no longer childlike but deep and hollow, as if an adult were speaking from the bottom of a well. "You are mine?" Everything around him went dark. Only the unsteady glow of the oil lamp lit her deathly pale face, and the small figures that began to appear behind her. One by one, standing still, staring straight at him, the mud beneath Hiő's feet suddenly gave way, pulling him down, inch by inch. The cold mud felt like hundreds of tiny hands clutching at his ankles. Dragging Hiếu down, he thrashed, But every movement only made him sink faster. The oil lamp slipped from his grasp, rolling into a thicket, its faint remaining light barely illuminating the pale faces surrounding him. Through the sound of rain, Hiếu clearly heard Mr. Bay's voice in his memory. Low and hoarse. "If your feet get caught in the mud at the bamboo grove, there's no way back." Gritting his teeth, Hiếu shouted, his voice breaking from the chill. "What do you want from me?" One of the small figures nearest to him stepped forward. It bent down until its face was inches from his, its large eyes void of any whites, and spoke in a shrill, piercing voice with perfectly clear words. "Give it back." Rain lashed into his mouth as he demanded urgently. "Give what back? Tell me." The girl in the white dress, the one who had led him here, tilted her head, her lips curling into a crooked smile. She held out her hand, and from within the curtain of rain, the doll appeared again, cradled neatly in her small palm. Hiő's eyes widened. He knew he had thrown it away, yet now it was here, its muddy surface still dripping, the water running down her arm. She spoke slowly, each word dropping heavy into the air. "This is not yours." A sudden gust struck his face, forcing him to shut his eyes. When he opened them, everything had changed. The rain was gone, replaced by pitch darkness and the thick, metallic stench of long-dried blood. The mud beneath his feet had become cracked, dry ground, yet the invisible hands still clung to him. Hiếu drew in a breath, steadying himself. His voice was softer now, but resolute. "If it's not mine, then take it back where it belongs. I don't want it anymore." The girl stayed silent for a moment, then suddenly pressed the doll against his chest. A wave of ice shot straight into his heart, stealing his breath. Flashes erupted in his mind, a deserted thatched house, the sound of a child crying, and the thin, bony hands of a woman clutching something tightly to her chest. Whispers flooded his ears, urgent and overlapping. "This path is not for the living." Then Hiếu felt himself shoved hard backward. His whole body plummeted into a bottomless darkness. No rain, no wind, only the sound of his own heartbeat and labored breathing. Suddenly, he landed on damp ground. Opening his eyes, he saw he was lying in the middle of his yard. The front door stood wide open, the oil lamp still burning on the table as if it had never left. But his sandals were caked with mud, and the cloth bag at his side was heavy. With trembling hands, he opened the bag. The doll lay inside, its glass eyes staring directly at him, soaked as if freshly pulled from a pond. Before he could react, a familiar voice called from the gate. It was Mrs. Tu, the neighbor. "Hiếu, open the door. Something's happened." Her tone was unusually urgent. Grabbing the oil lamp, he stepped onto the porch. The rain had eased, but the path to the gate was shrouded in a milky white mist. Mrs. Tu stood there, her clothes speckled with mud, eyes wide with worry. The moment she saw him, she spoke quickly, her breath short. "They just found the body of a child, right at the bamboo grove near Mr. Bay's place." The lamp in Hiő's hand trembled, its light flickering across his face. Inside the cloth bag, the doll shifted slightly. Hearing Mrs. Tu's words, Hiếu froze for several seconds. The oil lamp flickered as if about to die, casting their shadows long against the white mist. He stepped closer, his voice hoarse from the cold and from a tight, unnameable pressure in his chest. "You said, at the bamboo grove near Mr. Bay's place? Who saw it first?" Mrs. Tu swallowed, her eyes darting toward the pitch-black dirt road. "That boy Locke was herding cattle past there when the dogs started barking like mad. So he went to check. When he got close, he saw something floating on the water. He called people over, and when they pulled it out, it was a child's body. The face, hard to look at." Hiếu slowly turned toward the cloth bag hanging at his side. He could clearly feel a faint thud from inside, like something tapping against the fabric. He drew a deep breath, forcing his voice to remain calm. "Do you know who the child is?" Mrs. Tu hesitated, then spoke in a low tone. "No one's recognized her yet. Folks are heading there now to see. But, it's strange, she was dressed in white, and holding something tightly, looked like a doll." Hiő's heart pounded hard. He yanked the bag open. The doll inside still lay there, its glass eyes wide open, but it didn't look quite the same. Its dress was dry, free of mud, and its glass eyes shone far brighter than when he had first pulled it from the water. Tightening the mouth of the bag, his voice cracked. "Mrs. Tu, can you take me there?" She nodded, though her gaze flicked toward the bag before she quickly looked away. As if unwilling to stare too long, they followed the sodden dirt path. The mist grew thicker, blurring every distant light into a ghostly haze. Frogs and crickets shrilled wildly in the wet grass. As they neared the bamboo grove, Hiếu saw a crowd gathered by the edge of a pond, each person holding either a flashlight or a torch. The heavy stench of rot struck his nose. A worn mat lay spread on the bank, and on it, a small body lay covered with a white cloth. Mr. Bay knelt beside it, his face pale, hands trembling as they rested on the shroud like he was praying. Seeing Hiếu, he spoke slowly, his voice choked. "Take a look, see if it's her." Hiếu stepped forward. Mr. Bay gripped the edge of the cloth and pulled it back partway. The face of a little girl emerged, skin pale as wax, lips dark purple, black hair tangled and still wet. He froze. Her eyes were closed, but Hiếu knew without doubt, it was the same face that had appeared before him in the rain last night. A man in the crowd spoke up. "Strange thing, when we pulled her out, she was clutching a doll tight, but the moment we laid her on the mat, the doll was gone." Hiő's hand clamped around the bag strap. Inside, the doll lay motionless, yet somehow he felt another gaze, one from within, watching everyone present. Mr. Bay drew in a long breath, then murmured to Hiếu, "Do you believe this girl might be the one who died decades ago, right here at this very grove?" The wind hissed through the bamboo, sounding like murmured voices. A flash of lightning split the horizon, catching on the doll's glass eyes inside Hiő's bag, making them gleam with an unnaturally cold light. Somewhere in the mist, a child's voice rang out, clear as day, though no one but Hiếu reacted. "Take me home?" The others kept talking, unaware that Hiő's face had gone deathly pale. He whipped his gaze toward the grove, sensing that inside, a path had opened, and that small white figure was standing there. Waiting, Hiếu stood motionless before the bamboo grove. The torchlight from the crowd spilled out behind him, but ahead lay nothing but a dense, endless darkness. Each time the wind swept through, the bamboo leaves clashed together, their rustling sounding like distant whispers. Mrs. Tu stepped closer, gently grasping his hand, her voice trembling. "Hiếu, don't go in there. That place, not everyone comes back from it." Hiếu kept his eyes locked on that darkness, answering in a low, deliberate tone, "The girl, she's standing in there. Can't you see her?" Mrs. Tu froze. She looked in the direction he pointed, but all she saw were bamboo stalks shivering in the wind, no sign of anyone. A man in the crowd spoke up, his voice tinged with impatience. "Enough, let the police handle it. It's late at night, don't go." His words were cut short by the soft laughter of a child. Echoing from deep within the grove, the sound faded away abruptly, leaving behind a silence so strange it prickled the skin. Hiő's grip tightened on the cloth bag. Inside, the doll seemed to quiver faintly with each peal of laughter. Drawing in a long breath, he spoke with quiet resolve. "I have to go. If I don't, she'll never leave me." Without waiting for anyone's response, he stepped over the bank and walked straight toward the opening in the grove. The farther he went, the fainter the murmurs behind him became, replaced by the crunch of dry leaves underfoot. The fog inside was thick, clinging to his skin like fine threads. Suddenly, a tiny, ice-cold hand clasped his own. A child's voice whispered right in his ear, close enough for him to hear the breath. "Will you take me home?" Hiếu looked down. A little girl in a white dress, her hair dripping wet, gazed up at him with deep black eyes. Her face was exactly the same as the child on the mat, but her skin was warm and flushed. "Alive." He swallowed hard, then nodded. "Yes, I'll take you home." She smiled, then tugged him deeper into the grove. The farther they went, the more the bamboo closed in on either side, until the light from outside vanished completely. Only their footsteps and the girl's soft breathing filled the air. Before long, Hiếu saw a small wooden bridge ahead, spanning a stream of pitch-black water. The girl stopped in the middle of the bridge and turned to him. "My home is on the other side. But, if you cross, you won't be able to come back." Hiếu tightened his hold on her hand, his voice low. "I only want you to get home." The girl smiled again, then stepped onto the far side. In that instant, Hiếu felt her hand slip into nothingness. He called her name, but the only answer was the wind. Before him, the water began to churn, as if dozens of hands beneath the surface were beckoning him down. Behind, the bamboo groaned and creaked, as though trying to seal the way back. Hiếu glanced into the bag at his side. The doll was gone. In its place lay a soaking wet white scarf, ice cold to the touch. When he looked up, the girl was standing on the far bank, smiling sadly before backing into the mist. With each step she took, the sound of children's laughter rose again, until it faded completely. Behind him, Mrs. Tu's voice called his name, faint and far away, like it came from another world. Hiếu turned, but the grove had become a solid wall of darkness. There was no way out. The wind blew again. The bamboo whispered once more. Amid the sound, the girl's voice reached him, distant, yet right at his ear. "Thank you, Hiếu." He stood still, his gaze lost in the boundless haze before him, as if the world beyond had slipped far away. The wind kept blowing, the mist curled around his feet, and the bamboo grove closed in, as if no one had ever entered.